Hey, what's going on, guys? This is going to be a video about contracts, specifically for artists who are either doing freelance already or who are thinking about it. And what this is going to be are just 5 important things that I feel that every contract needs. This is by no means an exhaustive list of what needs to go in a contract, but these are 5 points that I feel are especially important to have. So let's get going. Number 1, scope of work. Now this is an important one because this is when you establish what you're going to do for your client. So in my case, when I'm making a commercial, I say I'm going to do the story development, the storyboarding, editing, art, animation, and I say how many days I'm going to work and what the workday is based on. In my case, that's an 8-hour workday. After that, I'll establish, what the specifications are for the project, and most importantly, that I may decline or charge additionally for work that I reasonably deem to be beyond the scope. I like to think of it like this. Clients can have whatever they want, but they'll have to pay for it. So if they want me to do another round of revisions, that's totally fine. But it has to be written out that every additional round of revisions, beyond what is in the schedule, will be paid for at the normal rate. So a clear scope prevents the artist from doing work without pay. So having a clause in your contract to prevent this is crucial. And that leads me to milestones. Milestones are important because they keep both you, the artist, and the client on track. You're delivering style frames or animatics or any other number of things to the client, and the client is also delivering you feedback at those revision points. So in order to stay on track with the schedule, they're going to need deadlines too to provide feedback. So for instance, if I deliver style frames on October 10th, like on October 14th would be maybe a good deadline for the client to deliver that feedback. And you guys can figure out what's a good amount of time for them. Milestones also set a clear outline for the number of revisions that are included. Some people may have 1 or 2 or even 3 rounds of revisions for any particular thing. Or maybe you just have 1. But having the dates written out makes it very clear as to what is going to happen. And it makes it clear that additional rounds of revisions will affect the project time. So if they do want more revisions, or they need something that exceeds the scope of work, you'll bill your regular rate, with the client's prior approval, of course. But it shows the client that if they want more, they're going to have to pay more. And lastly, breaking up the payment for large projects is good for both parties. If you have a project that lasts for more than a day, you may want to consider doing prepayments or installed payments along the way. So in the past, when I've done gigs that are like 2 months or even 3 months long, I like to invoice the client at regular intervals for a number of reasons. Number 1, it allows them to pay over time rather than all at once. And if you have a project that's lasting for 6 months or even longer, it's really good for the artist because you do need to get paid and you need to pay rent. And getting paid all at once at the very end of like a year project, that could be totally unreasonable. All right, number 3, payment terms. Now, payment terms are a big deal for obvious reasons. This is when you specify what the costs are going to be, who's going to pay for what, and when all the costs are going to be due. So the most important thing is to be clear about the costs. So what I do is I specify what my regular rate is going to be for each day of work, based on an 8-hour workday. Now, ultimately, I do bill by the hour because that works better for me. And I say that the final billing invoice will reflect all actual costs incurred. Next thing I like to do is be really clear about who's responsible for the additional costs that go beyond just the labor. So in my case, this can mean music or voiceover costs, and usually these are billed separately to the client. And of course, you're not going to select music or voiceover without the client's prior approval, but be clear about who's paying for what, so there's no ambiguity. Next, you want to specify the payment due date and the invoice terms. So on the completion of work, or the completion of a certain amount of work, you, the artist, will invoice your client for any amount due. And you specify how much time they have to pay when invoiced. Usually it's about 30 days. And the last thing you can do to help ensure payment is to add a slight penalty for late payments, just to provide a little incentive to the client. Now, usually this is pretty low, and there are some legal limitations depending on what state you live in. But in my case, this will be like 1.5% per month, or the legally allowable maximum if this amount exceeds it. So it's usually not very much of a late fee in the big scheme of things, but it does give a little bite to it just so that they have a reason to pay on time. All right, number 4 is a big one, ownership. This is when we establish who will own what. Who will own the art? Who will own the right or the title or the interest to the work produced or developed under the agreement, including the trademark rights, the copyrights. This is when you outline how the work can be used. Oftentimes the client will own the work, but the important thing is that you, the artist, retain the right to use the work and any preliminary designs for your own self-promotion and self-marketing, such as in a portfolio. This is so critical because there have been times when my client asked me not to show the work I produced, even after they had released it. But I said I have to, because in the contract, it said that I get to use the work in my portfolio to help me get more jobs. Because being able to display the art is so important for us to get new work. I would recommend never doing any work without this clause. There may be some times when you have a big opportunity where they don't want you to display the work ever, but if such a time comes, really weigh the decision carefully, because we can't live without our portfolios, honestly. And lastly, I want to talk about rejection of a project. The important thing here is that a client shall not withhold payment for the project. Basically, rejection of the completed project will not negate the payment due for labor or expenses incurred by the artist to date. This is really important because while we make every effort as artists to deliver something that we're proud of and that we like and that we think other people will like, there's no guarantee that people will like it, based not only on the fact that art is subjective, but it could just also be that the art doesn't quite fit with what the client wanted. Now, we do have milestones and regular intervals where we check in with the client and let them know how the art is coming along so that we can make corrections as necessary. But if you do come to the end of the project and the client is not satisfied with the final result and isn't willing to pay more for additional rounds of revisions, they're not allowed to withhold payment, because ultimately, clients pay for the artist's time, not for the art. The best clients understand this, because ultimately what we're doing is we're providing a service, but we're providing our time to do that service. So whether or not the client likes the art or not is irrelevant, because the artist still spent time on the art itself. So if the client does observe any non-conformance with their goals, they need to let you know and put that in writing in the contract itself. Alright, so those are 5 points I wanted to talk about in this video. There are other things that are important for contracts, but I felt that these were 5 especially important things to me that I wanted to share with anybody out there who's maybe thinking about doing freelance or is already doing freelance. And hopefully this has been useful to you. If you have any questions or comments or ideas, let me know. So have fun out there, guys. Make some super awesome stuff. And don't do work without a contract, even if you're working with friends, because contracts make things clear. And clarity is important in business. Alright guys, take it easy. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, let me know with a like. And you see both those videos up there? They were made with contracts in place. You betcha.